Thank you very much. This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. This is a little past 11 p.m. here on the East Coast, and we're live with new developments tonight. We're learning that more and more pro sports teams are staying away from Trump hotels across the country. Could that be why the president has a beef with the NFL? Plus, the president himself seems to disrespect a long-standing military tradition when he makes a joke as the flag is lowered at an Air National Guard hangar. Also, new reporting tonight on Russian election meddling from Facebook to Pokemon Go. Is there anything the Russians didn't have their hands on during this election? And did they target you? I want to bring in now CNN's Dylan Byers, our senior reporter for media and politics, CNN national security analyst Steve Hall, and Julia Kayyem, and CNN political commentator David Swerdlick. Good evening. Welcome to the program to all of you. Dylan, you have exclusive new reporting tonight about Russia's attempts to meddle in the U.S. election that went way beyond just Facebook and Twitter. What are you learning?
That's right, Don. Way beyond Facebook and Twitter, way beyond even YouTube and Tumblr. What we've learned is that the Russians even tried to use Pokemon Go, augmented reality video game, to effectively galvanize African-American outrage over police brutality, over police killings of African-American men. The idea that Russians are exploiting racial tensions by Pokemon Go would be funny if it weren't so troubling. They actually created this contest where they sent people out to find Pokemon and name them after victims of police brutality. And they said that whoever won this contest would be awarded with Amazon Prime gift cards. But look, on a more serious note, the fact that the Russians were sophisticated and strategic enough to use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, Pokemon Go, and effectively create an ecosystem where these messages would be reinforced for any vulnerable reader who is vulnerable to any sort of politically charged messaging. It just speaks to how deep and how widespread this effort was by the Russians, by this troll farm known as the Internet Research Agency.
You also found Russian-linked groups were trying to organize their own Black Lives Matter protests in the U.S. Explain that, Dylan.
Yeah, that's right. So after all of these sort of digital platform social media efforts, some of these people reached out to journalists, reached out to editors at local newspapers to try and tell them about protests that were happening. They also advertised protests on these social media platforms to effectively get people to go out in the real world and protest. And what that speaks to, on this issue, it was Black Lives Matter. It could have very well been with other issues they were pushing, whether it was gun rights, whether it was LGBTQ issues, anything that could drive a wedge between Americans, anything that could sow discord, giving the impression that America is in a state of chaos before, during, after the presidential election. All of it is sort of geared towards that. And we've spoken to some of these journalists who worked at these papers, and they said these people reached out to them. They had no idea who these people were. They could only correspond with them, via email. They thought these were black activists. They were actually trolls in Russia.
Yeah. Steve, I want you to take us inside the minds of the Russians. What did they think they'd accomplish with Pokemon Go players?
Well, this whole story, Don, evoked equal parts, horror, but I'm also impressed with the amazing resources that the Russians have poured into this. Yeah, I mean, is nothing sacred? Pokemon Go. Remember where we were just, not too many months ago? It was, okay, what did they do? They hacked the DNC. Well, we've gone from that to Google, to Facebook, to basically every major social media platform that's out there. And the Russian intelligence services are the ones that are responsible for carrying this out, and they've done so with amazing abilities. And as people have pointed out, the real goal here, because there may be some confusion, you can have a couple of different goals. I think the goal was certainly to influence the outcome of the election, but absolutely, it's also to find those pressure points in American society to get us going against each other. And remember, the Russian intelligence services are not just doing that here in the United States, they're doing it across the West. This is a large active measures campaign focused partially on the United States, but also on the rest of the West as well. It really is quite impressive and also quite horrifying.
Juliette Kayyem, I want to bring you in now. Last July, the day after Philando Castile was killed by a white police officer, the Russian-linked group was using social media to organize its own protest. What do you think they were trying to do?
So just consistent with what everyone is saying, they sow dissension, but I wouldn't stop there. The dissension leads to voting behavior. It either will galvanize people to vote, or if it's anti-Hillary, it would maybe suppress the desire to vote. And so that's actually what you saw. More Trump supporters or voters came to the polls than they expected, and fewer Hillary supporters voted than they expected. So is there a link between this campaign by the Russians and how voters actually behaved is something that I think a lot of people are going to be looking at not too far away, just about a year away in the next election. I will say, what's been coming out, we laugh about Pokemon Go. It's just a platform and it takes advertising. And that's what the Russians wanted. They just wanted to buy platforms. And they did it really spectacularly with Facebook, which they understood was the largest platform. Most people get their news from Facebook, but they're just buying their own propaganda. And so the question now is should we stop treating these social media companies like sort of agnostic platforms, or are they actually content providers? And that's I think the $64,000 question going forward.
David, to you now. The Facebook COO, Sheryl Sandberg, spoke to Mike Allen of Axios today and was asked multiple times whether or not there was an overlap in the Facebook users targeted by Russia and the Trump campaign. Take a listen to this.
What have you all learned about the overlap in targeting between the Trump campaign and these Russian accounts?
Targeting on Facebook is broad. It's used by everyone in
But have you
manual
found
review.
any overlap between the Trump campaign and these Russian accounts?
Well, targeting is something everyone uses, and it really goes to the heart of what targeting is.
But the Trump campaign and the Russian accounts, you don't know, or you won't tell me?
When the ads get released, we will also be releasing the targeting for those ads.
Why do you think she dodged that question 3 times?
So, Don, I think she's responding to Mike Allen's question on 2 levels. One is just the general, part of their business model is targeted ads. Forget Russia for a second. They don't want us to think all the time about the fact that, we're being tracked, we're being targeted very specifically, and we're being sent ads based on things we like, and those things are being reinforced. If you go to the question of the Internet Research Agency from Dylan's reporting, the Russia issue, then you have this question of, if you're in the position of Sheryl Sandberg there, if you haven't determined yet if there's an overlap, per Mike's question, about what the Trump campaign was targeting versus what these Russian groups were targeting, you don't want to get ahead of yourself. If you do know, you really are going to hesitate, if you're in her position, to go public with that information and get ahead of whatever the special counsel Mueller is investigating, because if in that case, if you say that there's an overlap, you're almost going to the point where you're saying, yes, we have reason to believe that there's some kind of connection between what the Trump campaign is doing and what these Russian groups were doing, and that is a whole different can of worms that she would open up if she said that.
But Dylan, I mean,
Don, can I just add to that point?
Yeah.
Look, based off of all of my reporting, I believe Facebook does know whether or not there was overlap. But the point is that, which was just made, and it's right, Facebook does not want to get ahead of the special counsel. They don't want to get ahead of the special counsel for their own sake, for Facebook's sake, and they don't want to get ahead of the special counsel for the special counsel's sake. That question for every organization involved, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or a media company, anyone else, they are deferring to the special counsel because they believe the integrity of that investigation requires that be handled by Robert Mueller.
All right, thank you all. When we come back, why the pro sports teams that used to fill Trump hotels, they're staying away, and what that means for the president's brand.